You know what it is, and you know why I'm here. It's now about 12:49 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I just finished watching the best game of this college football weekend. Probably the best game of the whole season, and for me, honestly speaking, the best game I've seen in years. You know why. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They just knocked off number one Clemson and snapped Clemson's 29-game regular season win streak, right? But before we get into that, let's knock out the particulars and then we can talk about the game a little bit. If you don't know where to find me, I'm right here on YouTube. Obviously, you're watching, but you can type in the search bar, The Format Podcast, and it should come right up, all right? Make sure you click that subscribe button in the lower right corner of your screen. Then click on the bell so you get notified when new shows are up, all right? You can also find the audio version of the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast, Stitcher, Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcasts, whatever it might be, right? We're there everywhere. But when you're doing that, make sure you head on over to iTunes, give us that 5-star rating. It does help a lot, believe it or not. And then subscribe on whatever podcast app you use, all right? I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter, at Bruce F.A. Hope. That's at Bruce F.A. Hope. And I'm on Instagram at The Format Podcast, at The Format Podcast. You can also email me, and the address there is theformatpodcast@outlook.com. You can send me comments, questions, whatever. I don't care if you say you like it. I don't care if you say you hate it. It lets me know you're listening, and I just love the interaction. So thanks for that. If you want to send questions for the new mailbag segment, if you catch me on social media, just say what your question is and put hashtag mailbag. If it's via email, then just put mailbag in the subject line of the email, and then I'll know, and I'll do my best to get to those questions on upcoming shows, all right? So now we got all that out of the way. Let's get to it. Tonight, we talk Fighting Irish football. Yes, we talk Fighting Irish football. So sit back, relax, and listen up to episode 80. Yes, 80 of The Format. So, number one Clemson went into Notre Dame Stadium for the first time ever tonight, and they were number one in the country, as we mentioned. They won 2 championships in the last 4 years. They got one of the best rosters in the country, one of the best coaches in Dabo Swinney. They were on a 29-game regular season winning streak. They got it all, right? I think they've been in the college football playoff either all 5 years or 4 out of 5, right? But even though they were Tigers, they were still wounded Tigers. And particularly, they were obviously missing their All-American quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, due to a positive COVID test. Now, they clearly weren't worried about that because they got freshman 5-star quarterback DJ Uiagalelei, who was ready to go. And boy, did he have a night. And we'll talk about that briefly later. But Clemson was also missing some important starters on defense. And still, though, that's a team that's so loaded with talent that they can beat just about everybody they play just based off of that. Now, that's not to say they just do it based off talent. They have great coaching. They have great offensive and defensive execution. But the point is, when you have that much talent, you can be missing guys and still beat people, right? We saw that last week against Boston College. But Boston College is not Notre Dame. But again, we'll touch on Boston College later. So anyway, tonight, the Irish lived up to their name, and they were fighting.
The Irish can knock them off on this snap. Russian 3, dropping 8. Uiagalelei Steps up, loads and throws. It's caught. It's pitched backwards, up in the air. It's on the ground, still in Clemson's hands. And now it is down. It is over. And the Irish have knocked off #1 Clemson.
They were the Fighting Irish. They fought and they pulled out the biggest win of Coach Brian Kelly's career at Notre Dame, and the biggest win for the program since 2012 when they beat #8 Oklahoma at Oklahoma in another big night game that they were supposed to lose en route to an undefeated regular season. So tonight's game was back and forth. It ended up being 47-40 in Notre Dame in double overtime. Crazy game. Super exciting though, right? The Irish came out strong. The second play from scrimmage, I was pretty shocked. They got a 65-yard rushing TD from Kyron Williams, right? And they ended up leading 23-13 at the half. But the problem there was, of course, you got a defensive mastermind like Brent Venables for Clemson. And so he's going to make adjustments. He's going to coach up his guys. That 23-13 lead shrunk, and Notre Dame had a lot more problems running the ball and doing all the things they were successful with in the first half, in the second half, right? So they really couldn't get much done, and they almost lost the game. So I'm watching this, and honestly, I'm feeling the game slipping away on multiple occasions during the fourth quarter. I'm starting to get nervous. I'm freaking out. I'm texting my buddy John Kennedy, host of the Always Irish Notre Dame football podcast. By the way, if you're interested in college football and especially Notre Dame football, check out the Always Irish Notre Dame football podcast. Great show. John's been on my show a couple times, and really, really good guy, really great show. Anyway, I really didn't think the Irish were going to pull it out. And in all honesty, going into the game, I picked Clemson to win close because to this point, I hadn't seen Notre Dame historically or recently show me enough to make me believe that they would finally be able to get over the hump against one of the elite teams, if not the elite team in college football, right? So anyway, it looked to me like it was going to be another one of those moral victories, right? But I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to hear all the analysts talk about it, and they're going to say, well, they didn't get blown out, but they showed they're a very good team. They can play with the big boys, blah, blah, blah. And that's only cool to an extent. At some point, you got to get that win. If you're the Irish, you have to get that win. If you're a Notre Dame fan, you have to get that win, all right? So I'm thinking Notre Dame's going to stay close in this game, but as usual, they're not going to have quite enough to get it done against an elite team. And to tell you the truth, I honestly didn't believe that quarterback Ian Book was going to be able to get Notre Dame over the hump. I just didn't, okay? All season, I've been watching this guy. I've been watching him miss open receivers or deliver the ball too late to make that impact throw that all the great QBs like Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields or even the young DJ Uiagalelei can make with regularity, right? And I was tweeting this stuff during the game, so it's not like I'm just saying it now, right? If you go back and check my Twitter, again, that's at Bruce F.A. Hope on Twitter, you can see where I was, complaining about some of this stuff during the game, Anyway, Ian Book, he's the guy, he doesn't throw guys open. He doesn't make the anticipatory throws to where a receiver or a tight end or a running back, whoever is running the route, coming out of their break, and the ball is there waiting on them. A lot of times he's holding the ball too long and he's delivering it late, throwing it into traffic, and it causes problems, or maybe gets picked off or doesn't get to the receiver, right? And that's a problem, right? And he missed a few wide open throws tonight, whether it was throws that could have just moved the chain or throws that could have scored, all right? But tonight is not the night for me to rip Ian Book. I'm going to give him some credit here in a couple minutes, all right? He also fumbled away a golden red zone opportunity to take a lead in the fourth quarter. But to Ian Book's credit, and I got to give him credit, he made timely plays on the ground again and again and again in this game. He carried the ball 15 times for 68 yards. Some were on designed runs, but a lot of them were on scrambles. He used his legs to extend plays and give receivers time to get open. He didn't throw an interception, so that's cool. He had the one fumble that got, in the red zone that got recovered by Clemson in the end zone, but he did not throw an interception, so that's good. He threw for 310 yards and a touchdown. This was overall one of, if not his best game. No, it was his best game of the season by virtue of how he ended the game. But anyway, he did it all right? He led the drive to put the game into overtime with about a minute left in regulation. And he connected on multiple big-time throws. Again, you can see all this on Twitter. He connected on multiple big-time throws before he hit Avery Davis just over the goal line for the tying score with less than a minute left in the fourth quarter, right? Yes, Ian Book did it all tonight. So I know it sounded like I started off by ripping him, by saying, the areas where I thought he's deficient. And I still think he's deficient in those areas. But tonight is not the night for that because he came up big when the Irish needed him most, right? So on the other side of that, Notre Dame also punched Clemson in the mouth on the ground. We've been hearing all year how Notre Dame has the best, most experienced offensive line in the country. But we had yet to we've been hearing that about Notre Dame for years, right? O-line, you and all that. They're sending guys to the league, really good players. But we have yet to see Notre Dame, for the most part, really be able to run the football and pound it when they needed to against the elite teams. Okay, tonight we saw that. It may not have been the prettiest. It may not have been the most dominant looking rushing total numerically, but they got over 200 rushing yards against a talented, athletic defense that had multiple 4- and 5-star recruits on it, right? That offensive line protected Ian Book all night. Kieran Williams ran for 140 tough yards, especially in the second half when Brent Venables, made those adjustments I talked about earlier and did a much better job of controlling the Notre Dame running game to the point that the Irish went away from it for long stretches. They just did. But they found it when it was counted, when they needed it most. They found it. And they scored both touchdowns in the overtimes on Kieran Williams runs. Now, what about the defense? That defense has been elite all year long. But if you look at it tonight, you say, whoa, they gave up 40 points. Owusu-kormoah threw for 439 yards. Yeah, that looks pretty bad, right? But truth is, Clark Lee called another masterpiece, right? That defensive coordinator for Notre Dame is something special, even though the numbers don't look like it. Owusu-kormoah, like I said, he threw for 439, and that may sound like, well, how did the defense play great if they gave up all that? But the truth is it possible to have a quiet 400-yard passing night because you didn't even realize it until you saw the graphics come up on screen? That might be a reflection of things to come for this young man, but he's the truth. But the most impressive feat for me by the Notre Dame defense tonight was how they completely bottled up Clemson's all-world running back Travis Etienne. And coming into the game, you knew it had to be a point of emphasis to take him out of the game, and they did just that. Etienne finished with 18 carries for 28 yards, right? Not even 2 yards a carry. 8 catches for 58 yards. This is a guy that's been getting busy all season on the ground and through the air as a multi-purpose threat for them. He got completely shut down, and he even gave away a touchdown to Jeremiah owusu-kormoah on a fumbled pitch in the second quarter. Kormoah blew it up on a blitz. He fumbled the pitch. Kormoah snatched it right out of the air and ran it in for a touchdown. And those are the type of plays, obviously, that the Irish needed, right? Realistically, it might have been Etienne's worst college game ever. It might have been that. The Notre Dame pass rush. Let's talk about the pass rush briefly. It wasn't great. I mean, the pressure was consistently there, but all night they couldn't get home. They didn't have a sack in the game until they got back-to-back sacks on second and third down of the final series of the second overtime that sealed the game. Can't ask for a better time to get back-to-back sacks, right? By the way, before I forget, Michael Mayer, a.k.a. Baby Gronk, is an absolute stud. He's a beast, and he's a true freshman, just getting started. 5 grabs for 67 yards tonight. Key first downs to keep drives alive, along with some great tandem blocking with Tommy Tremble that helped get Kieran Williams into the end zone. Tight end U just keeps living up to that moniker, right? So now you see Notre Dame is O-line U. They are pumping out quality offensive linemen to the NFL. And they're also tight end U. They're consistently pumping out quality tight ends to the NFL. Just awesome overall. But there's still some work for Notre Dame to do. We're not going to act like it's all sunshine and roses, because I am a Notre Dame fan, and I'm so enthused by this win that I couldn't even get to sleep, which is why I'm sitting here at 1 o'clock in the morning recording this podcast now. But even still, I can be objective. And with that, there's work for Notre Dame to do. There were too many possessions in this game that ended on field goals instead of touchdowns. It just worked. And when you look at it, the elite teams, they get 6 instead of 3. When you play the elite teams, in most cases, if you get into the red zone and you leave with 3 instead of 6, you're usually going to lose those games. But the defense played well enough to keep them from having to pay for not scoring those touchdowns. And that's something they're just going to have to clean up. So overall, it was an incredible game to watch. It really was. It probably would have been even more crazy under normal circumstances had the stadium been full, 85, 90,000 screaming Irish fans, what have you. But we live in a different world now, so I get it. But now you got to wonder, which way do these teams go for the rest of the season? How does Clemson react to its first regular season loss in years? How does Notre Dame react to its biggest win in over 8 years? The Irish have a big problem on their hands now, though. Next week, they have to go to Boston College, who has a history of ruining things for them after huge wins. Check the resume in 1993 after the big win against number 1 Florida State. Boston College beat them and ruined their shot at a national championship. So Boston College, they definitely have a history of kind of being the fly in Notre Dame's ointment, and it's terrible. It's not just BC either, though. Let's look at it. The Eagles quarterback is none other than Phil Jurkovec, who was recruited by Notre Dame and spent 2 years as Ian Book's backup. Yeah, you think he won't be ready? You think he won't have a chip on his shoulder? I think it's a fair assumption that Clemson and Notre Dame, or maybe that's Notre Dame and Clemson now, since Notre Dame just beat them and knocked them off the perch. But anyway, it's a fair assumption that they're probably going to see each other in about a month in the ACC championship game in Charlotte. And Clemson, I can assume, is going to have fire in their eyes. Dabo going to have them ready to go. And Notre Dame, though, is going to know that they can beat them if they play as well as they can play. And realistically, like we talked about, Notre Dame still has things to clean up. So if they can take some of those possessions and instead of getting field goals, they're getting touchdowns, maybe they say they beat Clemson going away by maybe 14, or maybe more instead of just the 7 points. And maybe it doesn't make it to double overtime, right? But anyway, in that game, Trevor Lawrence is going to be back, barring injuries, and maybe so will some of the other defensive starters who are injured, and they will be ready for war. I think we can safely assume that. So there's still a long way to go in this season, but for tonight, it's 1988 all over again, or maybe it's 1993 all over again. But this time, it wasn't the Catholics versus the convicts, and this time, it wasn't Bobby Bowden, Charlie Ward, and the Seminoles invading the house that Rockne built. Nope. This time, it was the new dynasty, a bunch of hungry tigers looking to add to their territory. But this time, the Irish managed to keep fighting. They found a way. They got the job done. For one night, nobody can say close but no cigar. Nobody can say Notre Dame is looking better. They're closing the gap, but they're not there yet. For one night, that signature win, it's here. It's been achieved. And now the bar is raised. Notre Dame showed that they can play with the big boys, but that's just one step. It doesn't stop there. The Irish have to make a playoff, and they have to win a championship for the first time in 32 years. And who knows if they're going to do that. But for tonight, one night, they showed that they can be the best team in the country when they play at their best. And after 32 years, it has to start somewhere. So that's all I got on this abbreviated post Notre Dame versus Clemson episode of the Format Podcast. Thanks for checking it out. I'll be back during the week with the normal lengthy episode. Again, hopefully I'll have a special guest for you, and I'll have some more good stuff. But between now and then, I got to get this done, and then I got to get some sleep. I'm out. Peace.